Hi, I'm DJ Ware. On this episode of the Cyber Gizmo, I'm going to be talking about how to balance your PC, but more importantly, it's more about than how, because there's a lot of things that we need to talk about and some things that you'll have to do on your own. But I'll tell you what those are. I have a quote, and this is from Grace Hopper. She said that a glass is neither half empty or half full. Is simply larger than it needs to be. That's the way that good engineers that are designing systems, that's the way they look at things, is not to overbuild or underbuild, but to build what is needed for the amount of time that the machine has to last. We're going to be talking about this a lot today, and that's latency. The definition of latency is that is a delay that occurs before the transfer of data. It's everything you need to get up to the point where data can start to flow, but it doesn't include moving the data across whatever medium it needs to cross in order to get to the other side. Bigger question is, should you upgrade or should you just go and replace? Some of the components will allow you to upgrade. Now, there are some manufacturers that they solder everything down. There's no way that you can upgrade. All you can do is go out and buy a new one. So in those cases, you may want to over-engineer your initial purchase. How do you know what components to upgrade though? And how much of a benefit will you actually see from upgrading different components? That's the big question, right? So on a desktop or laptop, for that matter, you have a lot of different components that go into it. The barrel represents the law of minimums. The law of minimums is pick the wrong thing to upgrade and your machine performs the same, because your machine can only perform as well as the component which is holding it back. So if, in this case, let's say that lower stave, the stave being the slats on the barrel, let's say the one that has the, in front there, that is the lowest, let's say that's your CPU, and you choose to upgrade memory. Well, your machine's not going to do anything different, right? It's stuck behind the CPU's performance. There's a technology triangle. Actually, it's a pyramid, but I took one face of it, and then you generally show the bottom ones are the ones that will have the most impact to the performance of your machine if you're able to buy faster models of it. The ones as you get to the top, however, the latency there is so small that the two things that's odd about this is that the ones at the bottom actually cost less, so it's a cheaper way to upgrade, and they also have the largest return. They will add more bang for the buck. As you go up, you pay a lot more if you want to upgrade things like cache memory, because that comes with your CPU. The general rule here is once you get to the middle of the triangle, upgrades above that line are generally providing very little performance benefits. Okay, so enough of the esoteric presentations. Let's see what we need to do here. So I want to install a package called Tuned. And Tuned allows me to change my system control in a prescribed way. In other words, somebody has gone through the trouble of creating profiles that will produce particular results with program execution on a Linux machine. So let's do a couple of them here. First of all, what we need to do is to see what's active. Balance. And we want to do a list. I'm going to go up to the top. There's accelerator. This is a throughput based on tuning with disabled higher latency stop states. And then there's latency performance. So that's the one I want to try right now. That optimizes for deterministic performance at the cost of increased power consumption, which is fine. So we'll give it the profile command, which says to set it. If you were to go in here and do this yourself, let's do a word count on default. 1,864 lines. So good luck. Have a nice weekend or month. It'll take you a while to go through all these. So that's what I like about this, is that it has pre-done profiles for us to try out. Okay, so I have that set. So but that's not what we want to do here. I just want to make sure that we're working. I want to set the profile to balanced. Oh, let's get started. So let's go ahead and start the benchmark. This is default, and you'll notice that on the right hand side there are two windows. One is the NV top, which is showing me what's going on with the GPU, and H top is the one to the right. And then of course we have the benchmark, so we can follow along. But you can see that there was already a drop in the utilization. You can see that it's diving down below 70 sometimes on some of these. So it isn't unusual for a GPU to go, 90%, 80%, but it is unusual if it drops below 80. Ideally, you want to keep it as close to 100 as you can without underclocking. And so we can start to see that there are two problems here. One is that we're not getting full utilization out of the GPU. Two, we're also running hot. You can see the temperature is up 74, 75, and we do see thermal throttling going on with the clock on the GPU. So I mean, this card is pretty, 2 years old now or so, and it probably needs to be taken apart, have all of the thermal the thermal paste changed out on it, so as well as probably the CPU as well. So, all right, so we're just I'm gonna shut up, and I'll put some music on, and we'll complete the benchmark. So what we're going to do is we're going to set this one up so that it is latency. And so we're getting ready to change this over. I'm making sure that okay, it started. And then we'll check the status. I'm just going to check active, make sure. Okay, so we're set at latency performance. All is ready. And I'll put top back up. And hopefully we'll get started here. And I'll put some music on again, and we'll come back when it's done. right, so we've gone through the benchmark tests and all of that. So I want to recap what we actually saw, so that you know kind of what's going on here. So we did an evaluation also on GLMark2, which you didn't see, but I used Phoronix for that. I posted them, so if you want to look at that, you can. You're welcome to do that. But basically, this is what we come out with. So I ran 4 different tests, one with balanced, one with desktop, latency, and then one with accelerator. So in this particular case, it looks like accelerator ran about the best for 720p and then also for 1080p. So yeah, it did quite well. Because one particular profile works in one particular set of applications, you need to test these with the game that you're playing, because there are differences in the way physics is handled. There's differences in the interaction with the CPU. There's differences in how many times it goes to disk. When we're talking about balancing a system, what we mean is that the data can flow through the system to the required devices unimpeded. So nothing's going to try to queue up. We're just letting data flow. There's nothing stopping it. But that's a perfect world. There's no such thing as a perfect world. So yeah, you always will find things. But you want to minimize. You want to smooth out those rough spots when things are running. So let's look at the Heaven score that I just ran 2 of those. One was the balanced and the other one was latency, but I also ran desktop and accelerator. So in this case, with this particular, I know this is synthetic, but one of the things that synthetic benchmarks help us do is iron out problems that are glaring. You don't want to start overclocking a machine or working on other types of things to improve performance until you get the entire system stable on its baseline first. Otherwise, it's like building on a foundation with half the foundation blocks missing. So yeah, it's just it's going to be a rough road for you to try to work through. And you're going to find all kinds of problems popping up that you're going to have to deal with. And so what we're trying to do is minimize that, make your life easier. So the balance had a score of 126 frames per second on average. And the overall score for that was 3183. That wasn't great, but desktop was even worse. So the balance mode that comes out of the box is better than if you were to set the desktop profile. Also, the latency mode did the best. So it reached a peak of average of 139.9 frames per second. And I hear you guys stickering, but yeah, that's okay. This is not the latest and greatest hardware. So yeah, it also had an overall score of 3524. I haven't done anything else to this yet. This is just getting my system ready. And yeah, there are some problems that we saw in that benchmark. There's temperature problems. But you notice that when we ran balanced, that there was these wild swings. The GPU was sitting at 100%, and then suddenly it would plummet to 45% utilized, and then back up again, and then back down again. And it always seemed to be when the benchmark was turning that large set of islands with the airship parked alongside. Yeah, that just seemed to completely crush that system. So where actually the bottleneck is for that, I don't know. Obviously you could throw a trace on it and find out, but at this point, I don't know. But I do know that by going to latency, that those dips and valleys came up. And a lot of times there was some noticeable stutters in balance. There were still stutters in latency, but they weren't as bad. They weren't as glaring as the ones that we saw under balance. So it was an improvement, you have to admit, a fairly large improvement for just messing around with a few operating system parameters. Accelerator did okay, but it's not quite as good. Now, Accelerator has a cap on how much latency. I mean, it doesn't apply all of its changes everywhere across the board. So, yeah, it's a little bit different. Now, I will tell you this, and if you run, I think it's the superimposition Unigen, Accelerator runs better on that. As far as general things as we saw, monitor your temperatures, watch what's going on there, because that indicates that, in my case, I don't have enough cooling occurring when the loads get peaked. Now, granted, Unigen is crushing that graphics card. Probably it's running it a lot harder than a game would. That's where I'm going to close it today. I hope you enjoyed this kind of a brief view of balancing. Just remember that balancing it's concerned with your system. When we refer to a system, we're talking about all the devices. With that, I want to thank my Patreon and my channel members. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. I sure do appreciate it. As you can see, it's helping me being able to get things together for you in a more consistent form. The last thing I want to leave you with is go check out Intel's site on their suggestions for balanced hardware. So if you're looking for something new, you will find a spreadsheet there that you can download, and on that spreadsheet will be comparisons for different, what they recommend for graphics card, memory, CPU, and it isn't always theirs. So, and it depends on what game that you're trying to use and try to run. With that, hope to see y'all in the next video, and bye for now.